born in 1952 of the Israel Military Industries. Bred by the Israel Defense Forces in many years of grueling combat. The Uzis submachine gun has proven itself in battle in the hands of military, police, and special security forces throughout the world. Uzi. The name is synonymous with ease of operation, ruggedness, and dependability under the worst battlefield conditions. It may not look sleek and pretty, but it just doesn't give up. Uzi, made by Israel Military Industries to the exacting demands of the Israel Defense Forces, is available to private shooters as well as to law enforcement agencies in semi-automatic versions with the same high quality as the automatic Uzi submachine guns. Because of the popularity of semi-automatic Uzis throughout the world and especially in the USA, we at Security Skills Israel have prepared this program to provide you with basic information about the various Uzi weapons and to show you in detail how we in Israel teach the basic skills required for shooting Uzis. Let's start by getting acquainted with the Uzis, how they're built, and how they work. All Uzi submachine guns are compact, lightweight, and easy to handle because of their low felt recoil. They are all fast, 600 rounds per minute in the Uzi, over 950 in the Mini Uzi, and way over 1,200 rounds per minute in the Micro Uzi. The semi-automatic Uzis are made by Israel Military Industries to the same high standards as the submachine guns. Uzi carbine, Mini carbine, and pistol all feature the same rugged dependability as the Uzi automatics. They are compact and easy to handle by shooters of all statures. They are all available in 9mm parabellum caliber. The full-size carbines are also available in 45 ACP, 41 Action Express, and 22 long rifle calibers. They're all fast, and they are accurate. Here's the Uzi pistol, 9.5 inches long with a 4.5-inch barrel. The Mini carbine, 26 inches long with folded stock and a 20-inch barrel. And here's the Uzi carbine, the biggest of the lot, but still very compact, 24 inches long with a 16-inch barrel. The carbine weighs 8.4 pounds. The Mini weighs in at 6.4 pounds. The pistol weighs 3.7 pounds. Both carbines are issued with metal folding stocks and can be fired with stocks folded or extended. All the semi-automatic Uzis, regardless of size, are blowback operated. Each one fires from a closed bolt, which is encased by the receiver and slides within it. All have a pistol grip with a magazine well, very handy for positive insertion of the magazine. All three Uzis use the same types of interchangeable magazines for 9mm rounds. 9mm magazines are available in 20, 25, and 32 round capacities, and ammunition is available in a large variety of different bullet shapes, weights, and energies. The semi-automatic Uzis are issued with standard iron sights, which are easily adjustable for windage and elevation, and in the carbines for two distance ranges as well, 100 and 200 meters. Except for plastic grip covers, the Uzis are made of steel throughout. Receivers are stamped from steel, while barrels are hammered. 9mm barrels have 4 right-hand grooves, twisting once every 10 inches. Every Uzi barrel is seated securely at 2 points for added rigidity. And each one has a flat protrusion which mates with the external barrel housing. The Uzi barrel is secured to the receiver by hand using the large retaining nut. There's no need for special tools. The bolt assembly, which is easily stripped from the receiver, is machined from a solid block of steel. It contains the inertial striker, or firing pin, the extractor, and the recoil or return spring. The pistol and mini bolts are smaller than the carbines, with slightly different spring arrangements, but they operate in the same basic way. The Uzi bolt assembly, sliding in the receiver against the spring, accounts for the low felt recoil of all Uzis. The Uzi trigger assembly, which is the same for all semi-automatics, contains 2 safety mechanisms. The fire selector. When placed on safe, it prevents the trigger from firing. The spring-loaded grip safety is normally engaged and prevents firing. It must be fully pressed in order to disengage and allow firing. The 2 safeties work independently, so both must be disengaged in order to fire the weapon. After getting acquainted with the major assemblies in the Uzis, we'll see how they work together in the firing cycle. You can't see much from the outside. What's happening inside? We'll use cutaway models and animation graphics to illustrate events in the firing cycle. Cocking the gun pulls the bolt back and compresses the return spring. When the cocking knob is released, the spring pushes the bolt forward. The bolt strips the top round off the magazine column, pushes it into the barrel chamber, and closes over it. Let's see that again, this time from the right side of the gun. Notice that pulling the bolt back also cocks the striker spring, preparing it for firing. Once again, watch the top round. Pulling the bolt back allows the magazine spring to push the top round into position for chambering by the bolt. Once a round is chambered and both safeties are disengaged, pulling the trigger releases the striker, and off goes the bullet. The empty case blows back against the bolt, which slides rearwards to cock the striker and compress the return spring. The barrel in this blowback type of action remains fixed in place for maximum stability and accuracy. As the bolt is blown back, the extractor claws the empty case from the chamber, and the ejector knocks it out of the breech. The striker is cocked. The bolt chambers a fresh round, and the gun is ready to fire again. But only if both safeties are disengaged. Let's close in on the safeties. Moving the fire selector to safe prevents firing by blocking the trigger from releasing the striker. Moving the selector to fire will allow release of the sear and striker, but only if the grip safety is fully depressed. From the other side, we see that if the grip safety is released, it blocks the sear and prevents firing, regardless of the fire selector position. Uzi safeties can be applied at any time, whether the gun is loaded or not, with or without a magazine. These are important safety features for all Uzis semi-automatics. Uzis are reliable and safe, but what about accuracy? Let's look at the carbines first, using 115 grain full metal jacket 9mm cartridges by Samson, and firing from stable positions. The carbines typically give groups of about 2.5 centimeters, about an inch, at 50 meters. 5 centimeters, that's 2 inches, at 100 meters. 12 centimeters, about 5 inches, at 200 meters. Very good accuracy indeed, especially for semi-automatic weapons. The Uzi pistol with a 4.5-inch barrel and using the same ammunition typically gives groups of about 10 centimeters, about 4 inches, at 25 meters distance. Here again, very good results. All shooters, whether private citizens or policemen, sportsmen or security guards, must think of safety first. Gun safety begins with one critical assumption. Every gun is loaded always. Believe in this and live. Therefore, clear and check your gun whenever you receive it or pick it up. Immediately after firing it, before stripping it, before you hand it over, before you put it down or store it. To be safe, act safely. Follow the basic rules of safety at all times. Never point a gun at anyone unless you intend to shoot him. Never inspect a barrel while it is mounted on the gun. Dismantle it first. Be sure of a safe backstop whenever you point a gun. Carry your gun with an empty chamber until you are ready to shoot. Keep your safety on until you are ready to shoot. Keep your trigger finger on the guard until you are ready to shoot. Carry your gun in a safe position. Handguns should always be holstered when being carried. Always use shooting glasses and ear protectors when shooting for sport. Follow range safety rules. Store your gun in a safe place, inaccessible to children and unauthorized persons. Clearing and checking your weapon is one of the keys to safety, but it can be dangerous in itself. Let's learn how to do it safely. Let's view the clear and check procedure slowly. Position yourself near a solid wall or face a safe backstop. Point the barrel at the backstop or at the wall, preferably at 45 degrees to the vertical. Hold the gun securely in your shooting hand with your trigger finger on the trigger guard. Set the selector to safe and remove the magazine. Set the selector to fire and rack the cocking knob back and forth to clear the chamber. Then, holding the bolt back, look at the chamber carefully and verify that it's empty. Release the bolt and pull the trigger to release the striker. Set the selector on safe. Your gun is now cleared, checked, and locked. Let's see that one more time briefly. Selector on safe. Remove magazine. Selector on fire. Clear and check chamber. Release bolt. Release trigger. Selector on safe. Before we teach the basic skills involved in shooting Uzis, we make sure that the shooter knows how to disassemble, clean, and assemble his weapon, that he or she gets a hands-on feel for the weapon. The first step is, you guessed it, clear and check your weapon safely by the book. Then, press down on the retaining nut catch, unscrew the nut, and remove the barrel. To remove the receiver cover, press the cover latch back and lift the cover up and off. Lift the bolt assembly up slightly. Push it back and lift it out, keeping the springs in place with your fingers. Pull out the striker and remove the return spring. That's it. Really easy. Assembling the carbine is as easy as stripping it. Insert the striker into its slot in the bolt. Insert the return spring into the bolt. Hold the bolt assembly with the striker at the bottom and guide the springs into their positions in the receiver. Pull the bolt back slightly and lower it in place. Insert the narrow end of the cover under the front sight and snap the cover down. Insert the barrel. Check that the flats on the barrel line up with the flats on the barrel housing. Screw the retaining nut in place. When the clicking sound stops, the nut is secure. If you don't hear the ratchet clicking, the flats are not properly lined up. That's it. To verify proper assembly, clear and check. Everything should work smoothly. The stripping and assembling procedures for the mini carbine or the pistol are basically the same as for the carbine. The differences are in the bolt assemblies. In the carbine, the striker is separate from the return spring and seated below it. In the mini and pistol, the striker spring and return spring are mounted on one subassembly. Otherwise, the disassembly and assembly procedures are the same. With a little practice, all Uzis are easy to strip and assemble quickly. And the same is true for the caliber conversion kits, such as this one for 45 ACP caliber rounds for the carbine. It's composed of a different bolt, a 45 caliber barrel, and magazine. All other components are the same. It's important to keep your weapon clean and lubricated. It's especially important to thoroughly degrease, clean, and lubricate your Uzi lightly before you first fire it. While cleaning, inspect each part and make sure it is sound and shows no signs of abnormal wear. Magazines also need periodic stripping and cleaning. Here's how. First, remove all the rounds. Hold the magazine upside down. Press the catch down and carefully slide the plate forward, but only slightly. Be careful. The spring is under pressure and can injure you if it jumps out. Carefully hold the spring in place and slide off the base plate. Remove the spring and follower. Thoroughly clean and lubricate all parts of the magazine. To assemble the magazine, drop the follower in first. If you're not sure of its position, check it with assembled magazine. Insert the spring and compress it so that the catch is forced below the bottom of the body. Carefully hold the spring in place and slide the base plate on. Make sure that the catch locks in place. The next step is loading the magazine. It's all in the thumbs. Watch this. One thumb presses down the loaded round, and the other thumb presses in the next round. As you load, check the cartridges to make sure that they are clean and sound. If you are loading long magazines, or if you are loading .45 caliber or .41 Action Express rounds, you'll find it useful to use a loader. It helps overcome the resistance of the tough spring used in these magazines. Don't overload the magazine or you may damage the spring. Each type of magazine has a number indicating its capacity, marked near the lowest port in the magazine wall. Check it. You can choose the magazines you need from a variety of calibers and capacities. Now we're ready to show you how we arm an Uzi, that is, prepare it for firing. The first step, as always, is clearing and checking your gun. Next, position yourself and your gun safely. Set the selector on Safe. Hold the gun by the pistol stock and insert the magazine firmly until it clicks into place. Rack the cocking knob back and release it quickly. Set the selector to Safe until you are ready to shoot. The gun is now armed and on Safe, cocked and locked. To disarm your weapon, just clear it and check it. In order to shoot Uzis well, you've got to learn basic skills systematically. Practice frequently. And get personal coaching from a firearms instructor who knows the weapon. There are many different ways of teaching effective shooting. In this program, we will illustrate some of the ways preferred in Israel for teaching basic shooting skills for Uzis. The 4 basic skills categories are aiming, gripping, utilizing stances and positions, and firing. We actually think of aiming as 3 different sets of behaviors that work together. Target acquisition, pointing, and sighting. First, target acquisition. That means finding, looking at, and identifying the target. Second, pointing. That is, lining up the body and weapon with the target. And finally, sighting. That means accurately aligning the gun sights with the target. In this section, we'll deal with the sighting skills involved in aiming. The whole point of aiming is to get the barrel bore to look at the target so that the bullet hits our point of sight on the target. Since we can't look down the barrel bore, we use gun sights, which are mounted in parallel with the bore sight to align the barrel with our line of sight to the target. When we use iron sights for aiming, we have to bring 3 points into one line together with our line of sight: the target, the front sight, and the rear sight. For accurate aiming, the front sight blade or post is centered in the rear sight notch, with the top of the post level with the shoulders of the notch. The combined sight picture is superimposed on the aim point. When using an aperture or peep sight, the object is to center the conical post of the front sight in the circle formed by the rear sight aperture. In all cases, iron sights require us to align 3 points: the target, the front sight, and the rear sight. The problem is, given the way our vision works, we can't focus on more than one plane at a time. So we have to find different aiming compromises for different types of shooting. In combat or defensive shooting at short distances, we have to aim and fire quickly at relatively large target picture, which is often moving. So for combat shooting, we focus strictly on the target. The front sight silhouette is superimposed on the target, but it is not in focus. We keep concentrating on the target throughout. For shooting at more distant targets, we change our aiming technique. We focus on the front sight and superimpose it on the target image, which is out of focus. The rear sight is visible, but usually blurred. The important point for accurate shooting at longer distances is to focus on the front sight. Aiming involves lining up the gun with our line of sight to the target. That's clear as long as we aim with one eye open, as in target shooting. But in combat shooting, we shoot with both eyes open. So which eye establishes the line of sight to the target? Each eye sees the target from a slightly different line of sight. To complicate matters, each of us has a dominant eye, one which dominates our vision and establishes the line of sight to the target. It is the eye we should use for aiming, but not all of us do. If you are right eye dominant and right-handed, like the majority of folks, no problem. You'll naturally bring the gun sights up in front of your right eye, the one which establishes the line of sight to the target. If you are left eye dominant and left-handed, that's also okay. You'll naturally bring up the sights in front of your left eye. But suppose you are cross-dominant, for example, left eye dominant but right-handed. What then? You should raise the sights to your left eye, but because you are right-handed, you'll tend to raise them to your right. The result is incorrect aiming. You can correct for cross-dominance, but first you have to discover it. Keeping both eyes open, point your forefinger at a small object in front of you. Now, block your left eye. If you still see the finger at the same point, you are right eye dominant. If your finger seems to have moved to the left, you are left eye dominant. If you are cross-dominant, remember to present the sights to your dominant eye, even if it seems unnatural at first. This is critical for accurate aiming. Now that we've got some of the principles of aiming lined up, we'll focus in on the Uzi carbine sights. The front sight on the carbines is a conical post protected by massive guards. The post can be adjusted for elevation using the accessory sight adjustment tool. The rear sight on the carbine is an aperture sight which can be adjusted for two ranges, 100 meters, or about 110 yards, and 200 meters, or about 220 yards. The rear sight on the carbine is also used for moving the point of impact to the left or right using the windage adjustment. At the Israel Military Industries factory, Uzi carbines and mini carbines are zeroed in for 100 meters, that's 110 yards. This is the ideal sight for this range. Now let's look again at the Uzi pistol sights. The front sight is a square post marked with a white dot on each face. One click of the elevation adjustment moves the point of impact 1.7 centimeters, 2/3 of an inch, at 25 meters. The rear sight is a block with a square notch in which the front sight is centered while aiming. The white dots on either side of the notch make sight alignment easier. One click of the windage adjustment moves the point of impact 1.7 centimeters at 25 meters, right or left, depending on the direction of rotation. At the factory, the pistol sights are zeroed in at 50 meters, about 55 yards. This is the ideal sight picture for aiming at a target at that distance. A word of advice about adjusting your sights. Don't rush to do it until you're convinced that your aiming and firing skills are up to par. If you can shoot tight groups consistently, but they are off-center, you may need to adjust your sights. Unless you are an experienced shooter, try to get expert assistance for determining the mean point of impact and the proper sight adjustment. It's easy to do once you know how. As with any gun and any stance, to aim accurately, you've got to get the sights squarely in front of the dominant eye as it looks straight at the target. Here it is again, the alignment of the dominant eye directly behind the sights in one line with the target. You can't shoot well without knowing how to aim. But accurate aiming is not the whole story. There's more to effective shooting than aiming. You may be aiming correctly, but your aim will be spoiled if you don't hold the gun properly. Uzis have light recoil effects, but even an Uzi will kick back out of position if you don't grip it correctly. Let's see how we teach gripping skills in Israel. The Uzi carbine is great for getting a proper grip. The support hand, the non-shooting hand, holds the fore-end stock, or hand guard, while the shooting hand takes a firm grip on the pistol stock. Once again, watch that support hand cradle and grip the fore-end stock. The thumb should be pointing forward. The shooting hand completely encircles the pistol stock. The hand is located as high as possible on the stock, and the stock is seated as deeply as possible in the web of the hand to ensure that the grip safety is fully depressed. The fingers encircle the stock, and the thumb completes the circle for a firm grip. When preparing to shoot, the thumb is locked by pressing it down and in toward the stock. This automatically tenses and locks the wrist to give a very strong grip. The potent combination of thumb lock and wrist lock is literally the secret of a good grip. In holding the carbine, the shooting hand provides the power grip to keep the gun pointed and stable. The support hand guides gun movements and assists in positioning the gun in a stance, but it's the shooting hand that does most of the work of gripping. Of course, the same principles apply whether you are right-handed or left-handed. A lefty will hold the forend with his right and the pistol stock with his left hand. Gripping the Uzi pistol depends on the same principles, except that here the support hand overlaps the shooting hand. The shooting hand is located as high as possible on the stock, with the stock located deep in the web of the hand to ensure complete depression of the grip safety. The fingers completely encircle the stock, which is nested into the palm and base of the thumb, with no air between the hand and the stock. The thumb completes the circle. For a good, controllable grip, the pistol should sit in your hand in a way which creates a straight line with your forearm. While preparing to shoot, the thumb and wrist are locked by pushing the thumb down and in towards the stock. Before shooting, the supporting hand overlaps the shooting hand like this. The supporting thumb sits behind and over the shooting thumb. The fingers overlap the shooting hand and support it without pulling it aside. There's no denying it, getting a good grip on your weapon is critical for effective shooting. Basic shooting skills include utilizing fundamental stances and positions for shooting under various conditions. We'll start with stances and positions for carbines. The classic military rifle stance and the combat stance are both basic stances for firing carbines from an upright position. The military rifle stance is considered the strongest standing position for firing accurately at distant targets. It is a braced position, giving the greatest resistance to recoil effects and the most stable stance for aiming. Let's analyze the military rifle stance and how to get into it. For right-handers, the left foot points slightly off target. The left knee is flexed forward and turned out slightly toward the target, while the right leg is extended back to brace the body strongly. Both feet are flat on the ground, while the flexed knee remains resilient. The torso leans forward in a straight line with the braced leg. The chest is directed to 45 degrees off target. The head and eyes point squarely at the target. The butt of the stock is pushed firmly into the shoulder by the force of the support hand pulling the weapon against the body. The shooting hand grips the pistol stock strongly, and both elbows are pushed forcefully down and in towards the body. The left forearm pushes against the magazine. The head is held as upright as possible, with the cheek braced strongly against the stock. The sights are brought up in front of the dominant eye, which looks straight at the target. This is a strong, stable stance, very resistant to recoil, but it can be tiring. Don't overdo it. And be careful when flexing the forward knee if you've had knee problems. Watch how we get into the stance. The left leg takes a step in the direction of the target, while the body pivots on the right foot. As the forward leg flexes with the knee in a line over the toes, the arms bring up the gun to the eye and brace it back into the shoulder. The elbows are pushed down and pulled in toward the body. Remember these 5 pressure points for holding the carbines. The butt pushes into the shoulder. The cheek pushes against the stock. The support hand grips the fore end and pushes the gun back. The shooting hand grips the pistol stock strongly, and the left forearm pushes against the magazine. And remember the elbows pushed down and pulled in to give the effect of locking the weapon to the body. Let's see that again. No two shooters get into the rifle stance in exactly the same way. Each one tailors it to his needs, but the basics are the same. But hold on, this is a different stance altogether. The combat stance for fast-moving, quick-reaction combat shooting at relatively short distances. Speed, mobility, flexibility, that's what the combat stance gives you once you master it. But it isn't easy. It requires practicing firm control of all your shooting skills under conditions of rapid change. The combat stance is a totally flexed posture. The left foot moves to direct the torso to 45 degrees off the target. Both knees are flexed and springy, with feet flat on the ground. The body leans forward very slightly from the hips. The head is upright and pointed at the target. The carbine is held in the same way as in the rifle stance. Butt pushed into shoulder. Cheek braced against the stock. Support hand pushes the gun back. Shooting hand grips the pistol stock. Support arm pushes against the magazine. The elbows are pushed down and pulled in toward the body. This is a natural stance for shooting under fire or threat. Under such conditions, nearly everybody ducks down. The flexed posture provides easy movement in all directions. It's a stance you can get into and out of quickly. Let's see it more slowly. While pivoting on the right foot, the left foot moves to direct the body to 45 degrees off target. The knees are flexed deeply, feet flat on the ground. The torso is straight and leans forward slightly from the pelvis, not from the waist. The head is upright and points directly at the target. The carbine is held firmly using the 5 pressure points. Butt pushed into shoulder, cheek braced against stock. Support hand pushes back. Shooting hand grips pistol stock. Support forearm braces against magazine. And the elbows are pushed down forcefully. To change targets, the gun is lowered and the head faces the new target. The body pivots on the foot nearest the target, and the gun is raised while the stance is completed. Watch it again. The kneeling position, if done correctly, gives even greater stability for long-range shooting than the military rifle position. It also presents a smaller target to the enemy, but it requires a flexible body and a great deal of practice to master. Don't even attempt the kneeling position if you've got problems with your back or knees, or if you're greatly overweight. In the classic or military kneeling position for right-handers, the left leg is bent at the knee, which is pointed at the target, and the left foot is flat on the ground, also pointed at the target. The right leg points away from the target and is folded under, the knee touching the ground, and the flexed foot located under the right buttock. If possible, the shooter sits back on the flexed or folded foot. The elbow of the left or support arm rests on the left knee, slightly in front of the apex of the knee, forming one line with the leg for maximum support of the weapon. The angle formed by the two legs is kept as wide as possible. The torso is bent forward slightly and the carbine is held firmly using the 5 pressure points technique. In the alternative kneeling position, the combat or high kneeling position, the torso is erect, the head upright, and the carbine is held as in the upright position with no support from the knee. The position of the legs may vary to suit the shooter's comfort, but the gun is always held firmly using the 5 pressure points technique. The classic kneeling technique gives even greater stability and accuracy for shooting at distant targets, but it's slow to get into and out of it. The high kneeling position is less stable, but it's simpler and faster to get into and out of. It's also good for ducking down quickly, especially when you need to reload under fire or threat. Sometimes you really have to hug the ground. That's when the prone position comes into play. If you do it right, you can get the most stability and cover for long-range shooting. Here are the basics for right-handers. The body lies at an angle to the target, while the head points directly at it. The body is raised off the ground as it leans on both elbows. The left leg extends back and out, while the right leg is drawn up towards the body with bent knee. The gun is in a straight line from the eye to the target, with the sights raised to the eye at a height which is comfortable to prevent straining the neck and shoulders. The gun is held using the 5 pressure points: shoulder, cheek, fore-end stock, pistol stock, and forearm. There must be dozens of ways of getting into the prone position. Here's a fast and elegant one. As the support hand is braced on the ground, the legs kick back and the torso is lowered to the ground as each leg takes up its special position. Let's see that again. It's important to separate the elbows properly in order to get the best support for the weapon and to present the sights to the eye at the right height. The right leg must be drawn up to the body to allow the upper torso to be supported on the elbows without straining. The more you practice getting into position correctly, the faster you'll be able to do it, with a minimum of movements and adjustments. We've covered the fundamental shooting positions for the carbines. In the following, we'll look at the basic positions for shooting the Uzi pistol. First, let's review some major points regarding aiming and gripping skills for the Uzi pistol. When there's time to aim for accuracy, we focus on the front sight as it is superimposed on the target, and then adjust our aim for the ideal sight picture, such as this. But in combat shooting, we focus on the target and concentrate on it, while keeping the silhouette of the front sight superimposed on the target. To get on target quickly, we practice a rapid pointing method in which the gun is instinctively brought up and through our line of sight to the target, as though we are thrusting our hands through an imaginary box in front of us, which is centered around our line of sight. This technique gives us a very fast response, while letting us concentrate on the target at all times. For effective pistol shooting, a strong grip is a must, especially in combat shooting. Here are the main points to remember. The shooting hand rides high on the stock and encircles it completely. The thumb completes the circle. It is locked down before shooting. The support hand closes over the shooting hand without pulling it aside. The three most popular upright shooting positions for pistols are the combat, the weaver, and the isosceles. We'll start with the isosceles, the easiest of all the positions. The isosceles is named after the equilateral triangle formed by the arms holding the pistol pointed at the target. The stance is simple. One leg moves sideways and slightly forward to increase back to front and side to side stability. The arms are raised to eye level, with the pistol sights held in front of the dominant eye. For the strongest stance, the elbows are locked by pushing them up as the arms are extended outwards. The feet are kept flat on the ground, with body weight distributed evenly. The isosceles stance is a natural pointing stance. With a little practice, anyone can raise and extend the arms and hands through an imaginary box in front of the shooting eye, which is looking at the target. At short ranges, the result is a gun pointed squarely at the target, making aiming much faster. The biggest problem with most shooters is the tendency to bend back while raising the arms in a triangle. This almost always leads to shots placed too high and to lack of resistance to recoil effects. To overcome this problem, we suggest keeping the knees slightly flexed and practicing getting into the stance with a straight back and the body leaning forward just a bit. Introduce some changes in the isosceles stance, and you get the combat stance, the favorite among security personnel in Israel for combat shooting at relatively close ranges. Our combat stance is an isosceles with deeply flexed knees. The head remains definitely upright, not bent forward as some show it. The back is straight, and the torso bends forward slightly from the pelvis, not from the waist. We do it this way: back straight, head up, shoulders level, torso bent forward from the pelvis, and knees flexed comfortably and springy, ready to move forward. And this is the way we do the point. The hands come together in front of the chest and extend quickly with a snap to point the gun at the target. The forceful outward movement helps to lock the grip as well as to lock the elbows. The combat stance is more strenuous than the isosceles, but it is stronger, more flexible, and it's better for mobility. What is now called the Weaver stance or the Chapman stance has been around in one form or another for many years. Essentially, it utilizes opposing forces to stabilize the extension of the arms. The shooting arm points at the target and pushes forward. The support arm pushes back, and the gun hand is stabilized. The strongest version utilizes a straight gun arm, locked up at the elbow. Ideally, the head should be held erect with the gun sights directly in the line of sight of the dominant eye. Getting into the Weaver stance, or one of its variations, is done like this. The left leg is brought forward and towards the target to allow the left arm to flex while supporting the right arm, which is kept straight. The shooting hand grips the pistol, and the support hand closes over it as usual. The Weaver stance, or any of its variations, is a very strong stance for longer-range defensive shooting and for competitive sport shooting. But for closer ranges, where most shooting incidents occur and where rapid reaction is critical, we favor the combat stance. As we said before, the simplest stance is the isosceles. It's a good all-around stance and the easiest to learn. The kneeling positions shown earlier for carbines are used for pistol shooting as well, and for the same reasons: to increase stability and accuracy for longer range shooting, to reduce the size of the target to your enemy, to utilize cover when it's available. Get the pistol into your hand before starting to kneel. Entering the classic or military kneeling position is done in the same way as shown for the carbine, except that the shooting arm now functions as a sort of rifle stock as well as gripping the pistol. It should be locked up at the elbow if possible, or at least braced strongly. In effect, the arms take up a Weaver type of position. The right leg is folded with the knee touching the ground. If possible, the shooter sits back on the flexed or folded right foot. The body and head lean forward, pointing towards the target. The elbow of the support arm rests on the left knee, slightly ahead of the apex of the knee. If done well, the classic kneeling position gives you excellent control of recoil and aiming. The high kneeling position is simpler and faster to get in and out of than the military kneeling position, but it is less stable. The shooter kneels on the right knee with the leg extended behind him or to the side. The bent left knee is directed at the target. The torso is straight, the head upright, and pointed at the target. The gun is held with the arms in the isosceles position, with the elbows locked up strongly. The position is very useful for taking cover behind an obstacle and for shooting from cover. It's worthwhile learning both kneeling positions, but avoid them if you've got knee or back problems or if you're seriously overweight. The prone position, as we saw earlier, is very stable for long-range shooting, provided you have mastered it. In the prone position for the pistol, the arms and part of the forearms of both arms rest on the ground, with the pistol held off the ground. The head, which points at the target, is held up slightly to allow aiming. The torso rolls over slightly to the right side to keep the chest and diaphragm area off the ground and allow proper breathing. Unlike the position for carbines, it is the left leg which is bent and drawn up slightly to allow the shooter to roll to the right. To get into the prone position, the body bends forward, the support hand braces against the ground, the legs kick out and back, and the torso is lowered to the ground. Watch it again. Whichever positions you choose for shooting the Uzi, remember to suit them to your own needs and abilities, and to practice them consistently until you can utilize them automatically without thinking. a good grip, a proper stance, good aiming. The results of all of these can be ruined by sloppy firing, by poor trigger habits. Effective trigger habits begin with a good, strong grip to keep the gun stable against the thrust of the trigger finger. Let's start with proper positioning of the finger on the trigger. The contact should be between the face of the trigger and the inside of the first finger segment. Once again, the face of the trigger contacts the inside portion of the first finger segment. Avoid the two most common errors in finger positioning. Using the tip of the finger, which will tend to jerk the gun to the right, using the second segment, which in many cases will tend to jerk the gun to the left while firing. A point to remember is that the trigger is sprung to move forward after a shot has been fired. When firing, you've got to remember to ride the trigger forward with your finger after each shot to prepare for the next shot. The rest is easy once you've mastered it. It's hard to describe, but we'll try. The trigger is not squeezed. The thought of squeezing will get all your fingers moving together, and you'll probably jerk the gun. The trigger is not jerked back unless you want to miss your target. And despite our tendency to talk of a pull of the trigger is not pulled. If you think of pulling, you'll end up jerking the trigger. The trigger is pushed with as even pressure as possible until the shot is fired. Whether you're pushing it quickly or slowly, keep the pressure as even as possible. The real trick for good trigger work is to keep pushing the trigger without thinking about it, without anticipating the shot. The only way to do this is to practice pushing the trigger while concentrating on the target. We've shown you how we in Israel teach the basic shooting skills for semi-automatic Uzis. There are undoubtedly other ways as well, but the basics are always about the same skills: aiming, gripping, utilizing stances and positions, and firing. These are skills which every shooter must master. All Uzis, automatic or semi-automatic, are known for their ruggedness and dependability. But like all weapons, they are subject to occasional jams, most usually due to defective ammunition. We'll look at what we consider the most common problems and how to deal with them. What do you do if you've hit a dud? Cock and fire again. It helps to practice rapid and positive cocking of your weapon from a number of different positions. Sometimes the problem is not a dud or a misfire, but rather an empty magazine. Cock the bolt back and check the breech. If the magazine is empty, set the selector on safe. Remove and replace the magazine. Set the selector on fire. Cock the gun. Set the selector on safe until you are ready to shoot. Changing magazines quickly and safely is something you should know how to do in any position. If there are rounds in the magazine and they don't feed when you cock the gun, try reinserting the magazine and tapping it into place. Improperly seated magazines are a common cause of failure to feed. Tap the magazine up smartly, making sure you hear the click. Cock the gun and off you go. If you've got a jammed magazine, replace it and fix it later. Even if you succeed in unjamming the magazine, the problem may return. Replacing the magazine is the safest solution. Faulty magazines can cause failure to feed or double feed problems in which two rounds compete for the chamber. You can't see the second round, but it's there, pushing the top round out of position. Usually, the double feed problem is caused by excessive spread of the lips of the magazine. To solve the double feed problem, remove the magazine. Rack the bolt back to release the rounds. Check the breech. Insert a fresh magazine and cock the gun. If you've got an extraction malfunction, the empty case will still be lodged in the chamber with a fresh round behind it. In most cases, you can get the empty case out. Remove the magazine. Open the breech to release the round. Work the cocking knob to extract and eject the case. But if the case rim is torn or bent, or if the extractor malfunctions, there's not much you can do short of disassembling the gun and tapping the case out with a dowel or cleaning rod. To avoid most extraction problems, keep your gun clean. Don't let soot build up in the extractor. If you do a lot of shooting, inspect the extractor frequently. Follow the direction in the instruction manual. In this program, we have shown you how we, in Israel, teach the basic information and skills needed for effective handling and shooting of semi-automatic Uzi weapons. But this is only the beginning. Our next program will demonstrate advanced shooting techniques and skills for the shooter who has mastered the basic skills. Remember, to become an effective shooter, you can't rely on information and demonstrations alone. You've got to get personal coaching, and you should train under the supervision of an expert firearms instructor. Whatever else you do, remember our most important message. Safety. First, last, and always.